Mayor, and seconded by Councillor Lowe. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed,
Aye.
if any, motion's carried. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of July 16th, please? Moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Lowe. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, if any, motion's carried. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Lowe. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, if any, motion's carried. Disclosures of conflict of interest? Not seeing any. We'll go to the consent agenda. Second. Who do I have second on 5.1? Councillor Lowe. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, if any. Okay. Just let me see here now. On that 5.1, did you have a presentation? Okay. Yeah, just a short one on that growth graphic.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5.1 is an update to the growth at a glance infographic, and I'm handing it to Chris McKeel, Director of Development and Community Standards, to make the presentation.
Thank you, Director Nalavad, and good morning, everybody. I'll just head up to the podium. Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm pleased to present the September update, the third quarter update for growth at a glance. We have very promising numbers for the first half of the year, or for first 3 quarters of the year, covering from January to September 2024. We've received a total of 564 building permit applications, which is above the 5-year average of 554 permits. The total value of construction has reached $117.8 million. This is the third highest year to date that we've had in the last 11 years, and it's just behind last year's numbers by about $3 million. The 5-year average for construction value is $83.5 million, so we're about 40% above the 5-year average. We've created 404 new units at the end of the third quarter. This accounts for about 36% of the Housing Accelerator Fund requirement in just the first 6 months, which means we're well on our track to exceed the 3-year target of 1,124 new units over 3 years. To compare, the 5-year average for units created is 273, so we're just under 50% above the 5-year average. These numbers indicate significant growth and progress in our development activities, positioning us well for the remainder of the year. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions and the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. McKeel. Any questions or comments? Councillor Ogden?
A comment I've made, but I think that I guess I've been learned a little bit about it, but I think that if some provincial parties are promising to drop the HST, and that from what I've read from Newfoundland, PEI, and Nova Scotia, is that it accelerated growth, are, as it was pointed out to me, ones that were already in the pipeline, but it does accelerate growth. And so I think the public should watch for that we could be moving things along faster after the 21st of October, because some parties have promised to drop the HST. And I know I've talked to contractors who have brought that up with me and are enthusiastic about it. You don't have to comment on that. I just...
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? No? All right, can I get a motion to receive and file? Councillor Lowe and the Mayor on the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. Motion's carried. Next item. 7.1. And Lukic, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. 7.1 is the Housing Accelerator Fund Initiatives Update. Carrie Smith, project manager for the Housing Accelerator project, will be providing a short project status update, including progress towards city's housing supply growth targets, housing form sub-targets, and current projected activities in support of the 8 HAF initiatives.
Chair, I'm not sure. I'm just saying I can't hear anything.
Oh, yeah. Carrie, could you turn your mic on? Sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you
Start over? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So no, that's okay. Thank you for flagging that. Thank you for having me. I'm here to supply an update on the Housing Accelerator Fund. So from a housing supply growth target progress perspective, we've exceeded our first year housing supply growth target, which is 373 net new permitted units. We're sitting currently at 404 permitted units. And we've exceeded our first year targets for the affordable housing, missing middle, and multi-unit targets that are all sub-targets within our agreement with CMHC. So we're doing very well there. For the North End plan, we have selected a consultant, and it was approved at the October 1st Council to support plan development activities for Phase 1 work, which will begin later this month. Additional engagement activities and visioning exercises will continue through the remainder of this year. And in 2025, the focus will really be on drafting, refining, and adopting the plan with implementation in 2026. We also had an initial kickoff meeting with the advisory committee, and an additional committee member will be selected this month to fill an open position on that committee. For the housing concierge, engagement with the development community is ongoing. Planning has begun for the next event, the next developer symposium event, which will be in early 2025. We're also working on refinement of a housing concierge program focused on facilitation throughout the permitting process, supporting developers with addressing project-specific requirements. Identification of development projects that could benefit from that additional support is underway. And my colleague Andy Reid will be providing an overview of the draft HAF incentive grant program in the next presentation, so I won't talk too much about that. For unlocking gentle density, we have had some challenges with procurement of a firm to assist with the development of a housing schematic design catalog. We did reissue an RFP with a reduced scope, and we have received a single bid, and review of that proposal is underway. We are also working on amendments to the subdivision bylaw in regards to land for public purpose, which we're looking at facilitating money instead of money in lieu of land as a standard. And obviously, in instances where land transfer is preferred, a variance would be brought to council for review and approval. Both of these efforts are focused on speeding up the permit approval process, saving time and money across the board. For affordable housing, from the perspective of the HAF project, we have achieved all of the milestones under Initiative 4. And the improvements that were made as part of that project are now fully operational. We have issued and applications have been received for affordable housing grants in September. And this will continue on a quarterly basis where funding allows. Engagement with the nonprofit sector will continue, ensuring that these programs remain optimized and relevant. And an update on the Affordable Housing Action Plan, which I know you were looking for, will be brought forward to the next Growth Committee. And the new real estate manager working on our leveraging land initiative has been onboarded and is working on the creating a draft of a new land acquisition and deposition policy, along with creation of a new GIS tool to help categorize lands for development readiness. A draft of the new tool and policy will be ready by the end of 2024, with approval and implementation scheduled for early 2025. For zoning bylaw reform, Stantec has been hired as the consultant to support this initiative, and public engagement has begun with the launch of a Shape Your City site. And we also held a project kickoff event on September 25th at Lily Lake. The next public event will be an open house on October 29th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Crown Plaza on Main Street North, and more information will be put out on that in the coming days. A final version of draft amendments will be submitted for PAC and council approval before the end of 2024, and adoption and implementation of the revisions will take place in January 2025. For e-permitting, staff are working on a market analysis of best practice e-permitting systems, and a formal needs analysis will begin at the end of this year. Along with identification of integration requirements with the city's new ERP system once selected. So that work is currently underway. And identification and selection of the system will take place in the second half of 2025, with implementation of that system in 2026, just to give you a sense of the timeline. And for Initiative 8, Governance Reform, stakeholder interviews and background data collection is underway. A draft gap analysis will be shared with the Growth Committee in November, and this will inform the identification of potential governance models. Recommendations for a preferred model will be presented to Growth Committee and Council in early 2025, followed by implementation of the approved option. And that concludes the update for the HAP project. And I would ask that Growth Committee receive and file this presentation, and I'll gladly take any questions that you might have.
Okay, can I get the Councilor Lowe? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just got one quick question there about land for public purposes. Like, is it when you want to sell? Okay, so the contractor puts it up instead of the money. No, the money. And the land's there, and it's allowed to be sold. Does the people live in that area have the right to buy it too, or just the person that wants to build?
Through your chair to the councillor.
You say you're doing a review of it, which maybe that's what's being reviewed. And if that's what's being reviewed, great. Forget about the question.
Through you, chair to the councillor. The land for public purpose is actually for when a land is subdivided. And the focus is on whether the city, as part of that subdivision bylaw, takes money in lieu, which would be used for
Creation.
by parks to support existing parks, or if we decide we want to take land that's strategic for the city, maybe it's a connection point or something like that. And in those cases, that would be up to council to talk about the actual land piece if we went there. But in most cases, money is taken in lieu because we have an excess of lands that are not necessarily being utilized, or sometimes the land is not usable for any real purpose. And so taking funds to advance parks is.
The question is that the recreation doesn't need it. It's surplus. Does the party that lives next door to it or down the street have the right to offer to buy it also in conjunction with the developer? The developer can buy it, but can also be offered to the person who lives next door. And that was a question that was brought up in Montgomery Crescent. John, our chairman, was involved in that, or maybe you can explain it better than I can.
I think where the council was coming from, there was a piece of property that the developer wanted to develop, which was LPP property. And he decided at the end of it to pull the application, and neighbors are saying, well, do we have the same opportunity to buy it? That's just,
That's-
Okay, I understand your question now. So that would be something
I
that
didn't
we can.
explain it right.
No, that's okay. And totally good. That would be something that we could talk about or could get flushed out in the new policy
Good.
that's being developed. So we'll certainly take that back to the team who's working on the draft.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
thank you. Okay, can I get a motion then to? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Okay, next item is 7.2. And I'd ask to tee us up.
Thank you, Chair. Under item 7.2, we are pleased to present the Housing Accelerator Fund Grant Program for Growth Committee's endorsement. As indicated on the Growth at Glance chart today, there are currently over 1,500 units with approvals, but which have not obtained a building permit. The HAF grant program has been designed to incentivize developments such as these to take advantage of this temporary funding opportunity over the next 1 to 2 years. The HAF program will target specific forms such as missing middle housing and developments that face construction challenges known to St. John, such as the cost of breaking rock. The program will facilitate more housing supply sooner and in the appropriate locations. With the committee's endorsement, staff will be seeking Common Council approval at their October 28th meeting. Housing Manager Andy Reid is here to present the program details.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of Growth Committee. I'm happy to be here today to present the HAF grant program. So the grant program is a time-sensitive grant, which is entirely funded through the city's Housing Accelerator Fund, and is designed to stimulate additional housing supply from 2024 to 2026. The program will prioritize shovel-ready projects. So these are projects that must submit a building permit within 6 months of applying for the grant program once this policy comes into effect, but they have not yet started construction. They'll then have 6 months to show some progress on that permit. It's really important to emphasize the time sensitivity of this. This program has a great potential to really help us ensure we're meeting our HAF target and really exceeding those targets. As you heard earlier in the presentation, we're doing very well for this year. So we want to ensure that that continues for the next 3 years. So the grant is broken up into 3 different streams. The first stream is a construction challenges grant. The second stream is a missing middle housing stream. And the third is renovation of older housing stock into affordable units by topping up the provincial residential rehabilitation assistance program, the RAP program. And there's a second piece to that program as well, involving simply the rehabilitation of vacant buildings by nonprofit organizations. So I'll give you an overview of the 3 streams here in a minute. And altogether, this grant program, it's going to implement 2 initiatives from our HAF plan. Housing concierge program. So these grants will allow us to sort of work with folks who we know are in the pipeline and are maybe have been on the sidelines, haven't yet pulled the trigger on getting started. This could push them over the edge. As well, through the Unlocking General Density, it really puts the spotlight on missing middle housing forms, on townhouses and semi-detached units, which we are really lacking right now in terms of new housing starts in St. John. We're not seeing a lot of those at all. So this will really help promote those building forms, increase that diversity of tenureship, as well as the general density, like accessory dwelling units. So how we got here, obviously, this all started with the Housing Accelerator Fund program. So that agreement was signed at the end of last year. There have been a number of engagement sessions where we've, really taken into account that feedback. We heard from the Home Builders Association earlier this winter. We held a developer symposium in March with, I believe there were 91 attendees. So some really valuable feedback from that session. One of the key themes, the councillors alluded to, some movement at the provincial level which may, help kind of move things in a positive direction. But we heard a resounding kind of concern about construction cost challenges at that symposium. So that was also added to the residential market study, which was completed this spring, assessment of all those projects in the pipeline. And through those engagements, we held several staff workshops, reviewed our past programs, incentive programs, which, for a while we had incentive programs outside the Central Peninsula that helped drive new service development. So we incorporated that really into this hybrid policy with the 3 grant streams, and we're here today to present those streams to you. So the first stream would be the Construction Challenges Grant. And this grant, it provides 50% of eligible construction challenges to a maximum of 10,000 per unit, up to 15 units. These would be the basic eligibility, fully serviced developments, at least 5 new units. So there's at least a bit of a scale there, and at least 200,000 in evidence construction challenges. These challenges may be things like rock breaking costs, importation of fill, remediation of contaminated soil, or remediation of or demolition of former institutional and commercial uses. So an example project would be, an apartment building on a difficult to develop site due to soils, or necessary rock breaking of a new subdivision project that align with HAF priorities. I should mention too that this grant is stackable on the Missing Middle Housing Grant. It's also stackable and will complement our Affordable Housing Grant program. So if someone's hasn't yet started on their Affordable Housing Grant program, they may apply to both programs and will consider both. Another example project would be the conversion of a former school or office building into residential units. The second stream, the Missing Middle Housing Grant, this provides 5,000 per eligible unit, and there's a small top up there if the unit is modular or if it's an accessory dwelling unit that is a garden suite or a secondary suite. And this again is a maximum up to 150,000 per application, really so we can ensure equitable distribution through this grant program. The basic eligibility criteria, again, would be a certain threshold, this time 4 units, except if it's an accessory dwelling unit, we would allow that 1 unit to be eligible. And we've got specific criteria around building form. So we're really emphasizing the smaller footprint townhouses and multi-unit dwellings that are really maximizing the land use. So an example project would be, a homeowner decides to renovate and create a basement apartment or garden suite. There's a little extra grant funds here to push them perhaps to do that. It's obviously, $7,500 isn't necessarily going to pay for the project, but there are also other federal and provincial government programs they can take advantage of. And then the third and final stream, and I just note here, in the package, what went to the website has recently been updated, but there was a bit of an error here that I did update in advance of today's presentation. So if you see a discrepancy, that's just look for the updated packet. But the gist of this grant, it provides 10,000 per unit in addition to the building permit fees, up to a maximum of 50,000 per application. So we're not anticipating with these types of projects really that there'd be a high volume of units coming in. That's why it's capped at 50,000. And the 2 different eligibility criteria is if the project is coming in through the RAP program, it simply provide proof of support through their RAP application. Currently, the province provides 36,000 per unit. It's been recently increased. Or for vacant building redevelopment that's not coming in through the RAP program, because typically folks are living in a building with the RAP program. The applicant would be a registered nonprofit organization, the building vacant for 1 year, with written approval from the commissioner, and they would be creating at least 1 net new residential unit from what's today registered on Service New Brunswick. So an example project would be a 2-unit building, for example, that's on the city's vacant and dangerous building list. It's recently been sold to a nonprofit. So in this case, it would receive $20,000 through the second eligibility criteria, plus the reimbursement of permit fees upon completing those renovations. Another example would be a developer obtains $36,000 per unit through the RAP program, with a top up of the $10,000 per unit through this grant program to make mandatory repairs to their building. They would then enter into a rental agreement through the RAP program with Housing New Brunswick to provide below market rents. So the aspiration of this program would really be to, I guess, again, put a spotlight on the fact we do have older housing stock in St. John, and there are opportunities to redevelop that stock. There are challenges to doing so, and really encouraging the redevelopment in a way that is also encouraging the ability to make those rents affordable as well. Piggybacking onto the existing provincial program, or in the case of being owned by a nonprofit, where it's their mandate to hold those units in perpetuity. So in terms of receiving the applications, each application would be evaluated by a grant committee at quarterly intakes. We would have a minimum score required just to be eligible. And I'd say this is really a merit-based evaluation. We're looking for the projects that have the highest merit according to the scorecard and needs. So there are 3, I guess, categories that be evaluated on. Primarily, the merits of the project itself, its alignment with the city's plans, objectives, priorities through the HAF program. So that would be things like its location, is it in an intensification area? Its contribution to our HAF targets. Is it incorporating affordable units? In this case, doesn't necessarily need to be deeply affordable. It could be another measure. Is it maximizing the use of our existing infrastructure? The second category, the applicant's timeline, capability, and need. And the third category, project innovation. So those would be things like energy efficiency, accessibility, amenity space, other kind of commercial real estate innovations that the project would be undertaking. So in terms of what this would look like, if we approve at council, we'd be opening the intake. We'd leave that open for 1 month. We would then score the applications. The successful applicants would get a conditional letter of approval that would indicate the terms and conditions they haven't already. They would then apply for their building permit within 6 months. We would enter into a grant agreement, and they would have they'd be then set on a certain schedule to then reach a major project milestone. Because we're limited by HAF to use all of our funds by the beginning of 2028, we'd be looking for the projects, for the majority of them, which we're anticipating would be new construction, to complete their foundation prior to April 2027. So this would really, like I say, time sensitivity, this would put those terms and conditions on the grant and hopefully edge those projects across the finish line sooner and in alignment with our housing objectives. Finally, any project we do award funds for, they would be required to submit an outcomes report. We'll have all those reports on the city website for full transparency. Thank you for allowing me to explain the grant program. I'm happy to take any questions, and the recommendation before you is to recommend Common Council adopt the HAF program as presented in your package. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
I'll move the recommendation to get it on the floor.
Okay, can I get a second, Councillor Lowe? Okay, on the question, go ahead, Councillor Ogden.
Yeah, this is great, Andy. I'm thinking about scenarios. You get a young couple, got a single, got a senior, who all of a sudden they get a landlord who doubles their income by taking advantage that there's such low supply, in which that's one of the reasons why prices are going up so high, there was no long-term thinking about with an increased population, et cetera. But they can get RAP money from you, or from, where did they get that from?
RAP, through the chair of the council, RAP's a provincial program
so
for
that's
housing
the
in New
problem.
Brunswick. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to
Yeah.
walk this through. Somebody sitting in, I can't afford my rent anymore. I want to build.
Yeah.
We've got lots of land in St. John. So we want to encourage that, not just developers, we want to encourage that person who's thinking, geez, I can't afford my rent. And so I could get provincial money. I could get the half money, the Housing Accelerator Fund, right? If after October 21st, there's a change of government, you could lose the HST on your building materials. All right. So all of a sudden I'm sitting there with 3 ways to milk the well that's been coming dry because I'm paying too much for rent. Then this could encourage people. So what I would think that the average person sitting there is wondering, okay, where do I go? I don't have a contractor. I don't know how to build. So can you help them with those questions?
Councillor, it's a very good question. It's actually one of the half initiatives, the unlocking general density through the housing catalog,
Right.
which, by the way, the federal government is also doing. So
Right.
there's sort of 2 opportunities to take advantage of that. But that housing catalog, which provides sort of a enhanced experience for someone who hasn't developed anything before, maybe they want to,
But if we can teach people to empower
Yeah.
people and to become entrepreneurial, they don't have to fall prey to a landlord that has just doubled their rent without any options. So that what we're doing is creating an option here. Okay, who do they contact? Do they contact you?
Councillor, my door is always open if you
Okay.
have folks you want to put in touch
So
with me.
that's the
but,
Department of what at City Hall?
if you're referring to sort of affordable home ownership opportunities, how someone gets started, like I mentioned before, we have a couple programs in development,
Right.
but our one-stop shop is an existing
Okay, so they
program
came
as
to
well.
one-stop
Yeah.
shop and said, look,
Yeah.
we're tired of paying high rent.
Yeah.
We've got some equity here with our, the amount of the rent. It's, we think paying a mortgage would be cheaper. So they can come to City Hall and say, look, we think. And now the other one I have is dealt with a lot this summer, is a lot of seniors who have homes who haven't had their home painted 50, 60 years that we painted. But when I met these people, a lot of them are living in a double or triple building, and they're all there by themselves. And they're telling me they have no money. They're on fixed incomes, but they've got, I can just pick the streets and the places. They've got 1 or 2 apartments sitting there empty. So I even one contractor, I called them up and I said, listen, why don't you call these people and see maybe that you could fix their building up so they can get some income. So we've got a lot of those seniors sitting out there, and houses they've been in all their life. And the houses are sometimes run down, and they're just delighted when you fix up their property, cut their lawn, or paint their building. But they're still sitting there. One woman told me the 2 apartments have been rented in 60 years down on Holly Street. And I'm thinking, ma'am, you're short of money. So how do we get to those people? Like how can we, because that would help our housing problem. How do we reach out to those people?
It's through the chair. It's a good question. They're good thoughts to how to get to that. I think traditionally call them more the mom and pop, landlord, not the large landlord, but those who are seeking to rent or sublet out a unit. Maybe they, it's not their business to know how to do that redevelopment. So we want to create that kind of concierge experience where it's
Right.
easy for them to
But
come
that's
in,
some housing
take
that's sitting
advantage of
out there.
grants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would
So
it be safe to Councillor Ogden's point then to say if somebody wants to do renovations, or somebody, would like to learn more about, they could come into
Yeah.
One Stop Development Shop and get the permit application, all that information?
Yeah, I think if
One
people
stop.
knew that,
Okay,
that's a good point. I think
right.
if people knew that.
Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I have to suggest, I have to say it's pretty good. I'm really glad to see that we have a new grant spectrum that we can target. Obviously, I have to high five the targeting around the dilapidated buildings and renovating those buildings. But I have to suggest that we do an amendment, because I do find it to be problematic when we're asking nonprofits who, especially if they are trying to enter the sector, to act as the bank for the city. We already are asking nonprofits who apply, for example, the RDC, the Regional Development Corporation, under the Pre-Construction Application Fund, which is sort of adjacent to our soft cost grant program. We're already asking them to foot the bill of the entire project. I'll give you an example. If RDC were to approve a nonprofit for, let's say, $70,000 worth of design work on a building, engineering work, architect work, site prep, not capital costs, but things like that, that money has to be spent by that nonprofit before it can be received in reimbursement. So if the city adds on to that spectrum as well, in one sense, we're going to see a lot of projects never get off the ground, because we're creating the need for bridge financing, right? So nobody in this sector except Kaleidoscope will lend to a nonprofit or a non-market actor, or even a for-profit actor for that matter. Nobody will lend based on the approval you have from CMHC or RDC or any of these housing funders to give you the money to spend up front while you wait for reimbursement. So that's a big bottleneck. I have to suggest we amend the milestone section to change that required milestone to basically say, look, if RDC, CMHC, or NB Housing has approved funding for a project, Andy, you mentioned stackability, right? We're stacking some of these grant proposals, some of these new streams on top of existing programs that exist, like the RAP program through NB Housing. If any other party is on board to fund this, we should be willing to put money up front at the project position, because we already have other actors who are going to be involved with this nonprofit to ensure the completion of the project. So my concern is if we're saying no, we're not going to give any money to anybody for any reason until the project's finished, you're going to see a lot of actors, a lot of groups never be able to finish the project because they cannot get that bridge financing, because there's nobody doing that. So we're essentially creating the need to develop a market for bridge financial lending, which just doesn't exist outside the financial sector. And banks don't even do that. Like, you can't go into RBC and say, hey, CMHC's approved my project for $400,000, but I need $200,000 to get it going. That's not an easy stream. You can get it, but usually you have to have a lot of collateral in the game. And if you're sitting on an empty lot, or if you're sitting on an abandoned building, you don't get it. So to me, that needs to be amended before I can support it. And I don't see any risk to the city if there are other actors who have said, look, we are coming with funding for this project at these different phases. So and the other point I would make about the renovation assistance program, for the last 5 years, my conversation was with Lisa Petronas at NB Housing. That program was fully spent within 4 months of a budget pass, right? So this year, that fund was fully spent by the end of July. So if anybody comes along between August and the next budget approval, there is no money for a renovation assistance program. And, I am assuming everybody knows that sometimes these projects are very timely. Sometimes there's notices to comply on buildings and they have timelines that are prescribed to them. So there's not really anywhere you can go for 8 months of the year to get funding. And it's not on anybody's platform. I know Councillor Ogden said, hey, we might be getting a Liberal government. They might, excuse the provincial sales tax on construction products. Well, that's great, but nobody has committed to funding the repayment assistance program at any different rate or at any different envelope of cash. So we don't have anything to rely on that's going to change. So it's a major gap right now. If anybody comes along, and if you've got a major problem that needs immediate action, there's just no one to get money from to safeguard these buildings. So I think we're 90% of the way there, but before I can approve this, I do need to see an amendment there, because I don't want to be asking, the players that give this city the best chance to protect affordability, which is the non-market sector, which is the nonprofit sector. I don't want to be asking them to act as our bank. They don't have the financial capacity that the city does. RDC already does that, the Regional Development Corporation.
Councillor,
yeah,
I think we'll give Andy a chance to respond. I think you made your point very clear on this, and I think it's a good one. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor, just a few thoughts as you were talking. I would highlight the Affordable Housing Soft Cost Grant Program adopted earlier this year, which really was intended to provide that pre-construction financing. Now, the issue, you say that we don't want to make nonprofits a bank. If the grant is providing funds at too early of a milestone, you're essentially then making the city a bank, which can also be problematic just in the risk and risk formula. I would also just highlight
risk are you suggesting, Andy? Sorry, like if there's another player at the table, what risk is it to the city to speed up that milestone?
To take the pre-construction program, for example, again, the Regional Development Corporation does have a similar pre-construction program. That's not a full financing program. There's no necessary guarantees the project will be finished. So just to get back to the objectives of this grant program, we, as kind of presented in the earlier slides, is really focused on those overarching objectives of increased housing supply to meet our half targets. Now, having said that, there are a lot of vacant buildings in St. John. We have a program to monitor those buildings, and there's an issue there. So we are also doing an incentives review program, and reviewing vacant building incentives will be part of that program for the city's more permanent development incentive. So, I would say it's good feedback to hear that feedback, but from my perspective, I think the soft cost grant really does, which we've adopted, does provide that sort of financing at the earlier stage.
Thank you, Andy. I'm going to go to the city manager here first, Councillor. Let him chime in.
Yeah, thank you. Just to build on what Andy said, Andy's already really made some the key points. Like from my perspective, the soft cost program, grant program, was really intended to deal with that. And if you look at it on a one project basis, you could say, well, this person's challenged or this project's challenged. It makes sense to do it. But if you look at the scope and the magnitude of projects we have to deal with across the organization, if we start doling out money ahead of time and we don't have the controls in place to ensure and account for the successful completion of those projects, then we will be putting the organization at risk for all of that money that gets handed out. Because at the end of the day, if we don't meet our obligations, then it's taxpayer money that would have to be at risk to reimbursing for half milestones that were not met. So we're taking a balanced approach here in terms of looking at meeting the needs with some programs, but at the same time ensuring that people are meeting their obligations. And I would say, like, we did have a situation that is still, we're just kind of made our way through it, and it's taken about a year to make our way through that situation where we actually upfronted costs in that situation, and it came back to really have an impact. But thankfully, we had secured equity on the project, and so if we're not doing that, we are definitely exposing taxpayers.
Thank you. Bishop, would you like to?
I'd like a second round
when
you can.
No, I was curious about something similar to what the councillor was about the bridging, but I forgot about the soft cost grant.
It doesn't.
And I guess I'm risk adverse too when you talk about the taxpayer dollars, but Anyway, so yeah, I think my question's been answered, but thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ogden, do you have your line?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, Councillor Harris, you want to wrap us up then and we'll move on?
Yeah, I can't support it then, John. This isn't it. This is not going to happen. We're going to see, you can't be risk averse and solve a problem. You can't do the same thing you've been doing and solve the problem. The soft cost grant program is fine for development. I understand. We're talking about renovation. If I want to go get an architect and, RDC is coming with 75% funding and the city's going to get us up to 95% funding or whoever to get a design ready for a project, fine, I get it. You're right. You have some capital there, but the city is not upfronting any costs to that design app stage either, from what I understand. There's still a pretty heavy burden on the nonprofit to line all that up and to coordinate that entire project, and to wait on reimbursement from other levels, right? We have to have skin in the game here. No risk, no reward. Risk averse nature is going to continue to leave 150 buildings on the vacant, dangerous, dilapidated buildings list, and it's probably going to get worse because you don't have anybody out there acting on these, besides groups like Housing Alternative and others that I'm aware of that are just trying to get into that. But if we don't change this milestone, you will not see action on these buildings. It's just not possible. When the renovation assistance program is out of money by July and you've got to wait for the next budget cycle and you're looking at a notice on a building to comply with safety hazards or whatever, where do you go to get cash while you're waiting for CMHC and for designs to be finalized to do necessary repairs, or to put buildings back on the market? Like, it's just not there. So if we had a rolling intake on the housing grants rather than a 1 month kind of window to apply, if we had some sort of rolling milestone where 25, 40, 50% funding can be released based on certain milestones. But right now, what we have in these milestones is an all or nothing. You either complete the project and you get everything, or you don't complete the project and you get nothing. And I don't think that's going to solve our problem. So I can't support this.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Anyone against?
Nay.
Okay, motion's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, I guess that's it. We're done. Councilor Lowe. Oh, okay, thank you. Second, all in favor? Thank you very